please take us to your childhood. Where did you grow up, and your parents, school, etc.
Yeah, anytime anybody asks me where I'm from, it's like a very complex concoction. It's like, oh, my parents are Telugu, but me and my sister, we speak Hindi, and then, I studied in Orissa. So, but yeah, I pretty much spent all of my growing up years in Jhansi, living in a BHEL township, like in the middle of Jhansi. Actually, I don't know about the statistic, but when I came, they said that like no girl had come from UP for whatever 20 plus years, which I think like no girl had ever come from the UP quota. So they were always like, why did you come? Why are you here? I feel like how did I get interested in like engineering was like in fourth grade, we had a computer science class. And I think the minute I got that computer science class, I knew like this is what I wanted to do with my life, right? Because that sort of piqued my interest. My daughter, she is, pre-K, and before COVID, they used to do field trips, right? Field trips are amazing, right? Just like go, see a fireman, right? Go to a hospital, go to this, go to that. And I don't think growing up, I thought any of those things were important. But like in retrospect, something, you're going to go there, you're going to see somebody, and it's going to, yeah, I want to be like this person. I think it definitely sparks your interest.
You mentioned something about being the only sort of girl or the first girl from UP to be coming to Akhila, but really, how did that decision,
But
happen?
semiconductors was a course that I really enjoyed. So I would say like after computer science, like semiconductors was something that I was like, the whole chip design stuff at that point of time, I really enjoyed that. So I said, and then I think at that time, like electronics there was this tussle always between electronics and computer science, right? So electronics was starting to like tear up a little bit because India was getting a lot more semiconductor industries at that time. So anyways, the background is because then when I put my requirements, I pretty much put all NITs with electronics, all NITs with computer science, all NITs with like, everything else after. And I really like, I told my dad, if I don't get the first two, I'm not going. Like those are the only two I'm going to go for. And so that's how I ended up getting Routela Electronics.
Did you find any difficulty in settling up at NIT Rourkela?
Lots of difficulty. So my mom has surgery, I think 2 days later. Somebody comes to see her in the hospital and they say, oh, Akhila, you're still here. I'm like, what do you mean by you're still here? They're like, oh, we read in the newspaper the college started. So that's not possible. So as a result, I actually joined college. I don't remember exactly, but maybe 1 week or 10 days late. And like people had already like come in at that point of time. And just that little amount of time, I felt like I was a complete outsider. Like one, I came from UP and everybody gave me this like hard time about like why I came and stuff. But then like there was like no rooms left. So, trying to figure out what's the last bed that was left that I could take. I remember like that blacksmithy thing that we had. And like this basically comes back to I'm really bad with my hands and not so good. And I just felt so out of place. Like there were these guys that I did not know in the hostel. I did not know anybody. Like I felt like I couldn't ask anybody for anything. And that blacksmithy thing, I think I did it one day. I went back and my hands hurt like crazy. Like I couldn't lift my hands. But I felt like I had nobody to talk to. Right. So yeah, I think the first couple of months, till I started making friends, till I figured out like my gang, till I started talking to you guys, I just felt completely out of place. And I'm pretty sure everybody else did too, but you only know your own personal experience. And in my personal experience, I was like, where am I? One thing I want to add to that, and we'll come to my master's experience also, but I think one thing that I learned from that is anything new that you do, any new place that you go, there's always this discomfort period. That was the first time we experienced it, but since then it has happened so many times in my life, anytime I've changed stuff, that at least knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable makes it slightly easier in the future, right? Because any change that you make, it's always extremely uncomfortable.
I wasn't aware that you got a fellowship at IISc, and I saw it in your LinkedIn profile. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Actually, it like everything else in my life, that was also a chance occurrence. And I want to give some background on that, because if anybody else is listening to this, I want to sort of talk about how these things happen.
And Akhila, you were top of the class. You were one of the toppers, probably the topper in our branch, right? But I think what was unique about you was you were also involved in a lot of extracurricular activity. I remember you were part of a dance group, you were captain of the basketball team, you were also the editor of a newsletter we had,
Right.
uh, the first woman president of the Road Track Club of NIT Rourkela. So many other things that you were part of. So, how important is it to be, exploring things outside of, say, just the
Right.
studies, right? How important was that? And I want you to talk about being the first woman president of
Right.
the track club.
Yeah. So yeah, I think when I was thinking about this question, and I feel like um, everything that I know about leadership is through all of these other activities that I did, right? Everything that I know about people, talking to people, how people behave, how people don't behave, all of that stuff is through these activities. I don't think that, like, my skill set, my engineering skill set was through our classroom, but all of the other stuff, I remember in masters I'd taken a project management course. I'd just taken it for, I just wanted a 4-pointer to make up my grade point. And I remember going to that class and the professor said, I know you guys are here for the grade point, but I'm telling you, when you get out into the world, what I'm teaching you in this class is going to be 90% of what you're going to use. The remaining 10% is what you've learned in all of your courses.
When did you decide to take up MS, or was it pre-decided? And
yeah, so before I went to IST, again, I did not know anything about masters or studying in the US wasn't in my radar. I was going to go do CAT and MBA because that's what everybody else was doing. So my ISC experience was also pretty good. I actually worked with a professor in the physics department, but who was doing some image processing work. Again, a bunch of guys in that lab. And I think initially when I went in, they all sort of they were like, fine, she's not going to do great, right? There was that vibe that I got initially that it's like, okay, fine, she's doing something. She's not going to do anything amazing. But then when I finally did my presentation of like the work that I'd done there and I presented, I think they were a little surprised that I was able to figure out stuff and I actually like implemented some things. So then the guys in the lab actually came and told me, they said, why don't you go abroad do your master's? And I said, what does that mean? So they sort of explained it to me and they said, you can come here too, but if you are able to go outside, it's actually going to be a really good experience. And so they told me about GRE, they told me about like this exam and all of that. That's how I got to know about it. So
before we move on to the next section, is there any story from NIT?
Yeah, I don't want to share the stories which will get everybody else into trouble. So I'm trying to think of which is a better story. I think we had once gone to a place there was a bunch of truck drivers and I had to give a speech in Hindi on the use of condoms. And I totally bombed that speech. Like I couldn't speak in Hindi about that subject at all. Like I tried. It was like 4 years, 10 years compressed into 4 years, right? You got to meet so many different type of people. Like, you were from Bihar, Saurabh was from, Gujarat, and everybody suddenly, so many cultures, you get so many different ideas. And we would discuss all sorts of stuff, right? Like we were discussing Iron Brand. I know you were talking about like the FM radio. And then I was doing some other project on robotics. Like there was so many ideas. There was so much philosophy. There was so much just growing up happening, there's crushes and there's all of that just happening in 4 years. And now if you look back, for the amount of experiences that were there, 4 years is such a small time. But yeah, it gave experiences worth a lifetime. I've never had that level of, being alive in a certain place, right? Every day, every moment, there was something happening. There was somebody coming up with an idea.
Please tell us what firmware is and how does it, help hard disk.
So firmware is basically, programming a chip on top of a device which can actually run all of the sort of the mechanical components of it, right? So your Tesla car has, a chip with firmware running on it. So imagine if if writing to your disk is not in nanoseconds, so by the time it goes through all of the things and comes on your screen, it's probably going to take a minute, right? So the disk has to be extremely optimized. I think that one company had 6 or 7 types of engineers that they employed because there was the actual actuation of the head. There was the actual chemical substrate that goes on the disk itself. There was the actual magnetization of it that was going on. Then actually the disk, when it flies, that's actually almost like an airplane flying, right? So you have to get the right air pressure and stuff going under it. So that's why they're aeronautical engineers. They're mechanical engineers, who looked at sort of the breakage point and things like that. And then there were like firmware, which is software engineers that were actuating this whole thing. I applied to Hitachi thinking I'm applying to the drive division. And there's probably a drive division here in Seattle. And so I applied, got through the interview, then I start my job and I realized they are like what they were building was actually, they had these mainframe sort of big storage arrays that they were building with Seagate drives in it, but they were doing sort of actuation at a storage array level. And the team that I joined was actually trying to build sort of the first version of cloud, but like a private cloud. So they were combining server storage networking, and it would be completely sort of managed using APIs from the outside, which is what AWS kind of does today at the most bottom layer. And we would sell that into like big banks and stuff, right? So the challenge, this was 2012, right? So at that time, you had to buy like Hitachi storage, you would buy like Cisco compute, and then you were buying networking from somebody else. And then there were 3 different admins trying to pull it all together. And so the goal was, hey, can we just like build a pre-made package and then you would just have APIs manage all of that. So it was complete data center automation. So it was
take us through this decision. You were doing very well in Hitachi. You were a director of engineering, right? Then to take this risk.
Yeah, so I think taking a step back, so in 2015, Hitachi launched the Internet of Things division. And we had to write like the software for that Internet of Things division. And by that time, I think at Hitachi, I'd done like sort of 3 projects, which were almost from a blank sheet of paper. So I think one thing was clear to me that I love this whole blank sheet of paper. I remember like joking with my boss, with my partner at this time, saying we should do our own startup, right? We love like new ideas and stuff. And I think he had said like, it's very, very hard when you don't have the money to build a company on an idea and stuff, right? So that was sort of put on the back burner. Again, my career, the way I'd imagined it at that point of time was like do well in corporate, become like a vice president of something, and sort of, that would be my ceiling, is how I'd imagined it. Around 2018, what happened was Hitachi started making a lot of changes in what their IoT strategy was, which sort of wasn't really aligned with any one of us. And at that time, so my boss, Rich, who's my partner now, he said, I'm thinking of doing a startup. Would you be interested? And I think there was 2 parts to it. For me personally, I think it was the risk of it, the excitement of the risk of it, right? Which I think that's been a thing that I'm excited by. I like a little bit of calculated risk is something I definitely like. The other part of it was my husband was as equally or even more excited about it, right? So worked enough that we knew that we at least had a year or 2 of financial flexibility, that if one of us did not work, we could still pay our bills. Early on in our career, I don't think that would have been possible, particularly being here in the US. But yeah, by the time we'd worked for 10 years, so we felt like we could take that risk. So I think it was a combination of all of that. But if you were to ask me personally, I've always wanted to test myself, right? So coming to masters was a test. Can I survive this, right? And I think masters at Delhi survived. But like, the job or moving to Seattle or taking a new role, there's always been this like, okay, I'm doing well here, but what if I tried this? Maybe like, I'll really fail at that. So there is the excitement and the testing part of it, which I don't know, it just maybe is me, which sort of, I think, drove me to
that. Tell me about Xemelgo. What's happening in the field of, or where is the opportunity really in the field?
Right. Yeah. Manufacturing has been broken down into 2 things. There is a lot of standardization that has happened, because of which say your factories in China, just putting out a lot of standard stuff at extremely low prices. So then everybody else has had to figure out customization. To do that, you need very fine-grained controls on the operations. There is fine-grained controls on the machines today, but the operations, where the people are interacting with the machine, where they're doing certain things, there's no real good way to track that. So that is really what Industry 4.0 is talking about. It's talking about if you want a different T-shirt and I want a different T-shirt, and it's customized to your skin type versus my skin type, your color like and all of that, I can still do it at the same pace that standard manufacturing happens, right? And I can do it at the same cost because I have deployed different types of techniques to do that. That's the Uber sort of vision. Labor is becoming expensive, right? So anybody who is sort of dependent on cheap labor to meet a certain price range is not able to do that anymore. And then, with the supply chain disruptions and all of that. So now people are trying to figure out, okay, I only have so many people. I only have so much resources. And so how do I still get my work done? The only way to do that is to reduce your inefficiencies. So all the work that people do, which can be done using something else, should be done using something else. A real example of what we're working at Xemelgo, today on factory floors, all of your inventory is counted manually. All your raw materials are counted manually. And because it's so time consuming, it takes anywhere from a day to a week to count all of your inventory. People shut down the factory for that much time because you can't have people pulling stuff out of inventory, right? So you're losing a week's worth of labor time, right? And you have people counting it. Even if they get it exactly accurate, you only do that once or twice a year. So during production times, you're either running out of materials, which then you have to pay expedite fees to order that stuff, or you don't find where it is, or people are like trying to look for that stuff. There's extreme amount of inefficiency associated with it. And because there's never been a cost-effective solution for that, people have lived with it, right? Now we're saying tag every single thing in your inventory with a RFID chip on top of it, right? And when it enters, I'll tell you how much is there. When it leaves, I'll tell you how much is there. If it goes low on stock, I'll send you an alert. So for the first time in their lives, they have real-time inventory and nobody has to manage it, right? So that itself can save them hundreds of thousands of dollars, in lost materials, in inefficiencies, in expedite fees that they have to place, in like production getting bottlenecked because they don't have stuff. It's a very, very simple use case. But if you extend that throughout the manufacturing supply chain, there is the actual process of it, the tools that are associated with it, the shipment of it, the customer service, the customer support. You can fundamentally change all of that to become real-time operations instead of the way it is today, which is, delayed operations.
Would you say it's a software company or it's a hardware company or it's both?
So we are purely a software company. We don't make any of the sensors. We just get off-the-shelf sensors, whatever works for the customer. So our job is purely software. So if I were to talk about our thesis as Xemelgo, is we found a lot of hardware companies and sensor companies in this space, but we did not find anybody who was offering turnkey solutions in this space. So our thesis was we wanted to be like the Square for manufacturing. Like we wanted to go in there and say, just plug in this thing and it'll start giving you data. And I can't tell you how many times I've met customers who buy sensors. Somebody told them, go buy a sensor. They buy sensors, they plug it up, and they're like, what is this? They just get a barrage of data saying, on, off, on, off, on, off. That means nothing to them, right? And they don't have an IT team that's sitting out there. So we are purely a software company. Our job is to take that data, on-off data that's coming in, and then translate that to say, hey, this means your inventory is running low and you should be ordering something at this point of time so that your inventory can be stocked, right? Or your order is running delayed and XYZ are the reasons why your order is running delayed. So we are translating that information into business information that the user can do. And like you said, all of that is done behind the scenes because our audience is not a technical audience. Our audience is the truck driver. Our audience is the operator on the floor. And all they understand is, simple, like they're like, oh, this is like DoorDash, this is like Uber. That's really like how they get it. So all of that intelligence has to be like behind the scenes. And to the user, it's just giving them, here's where something is, or here's what happened to it. And we have to figure out how to make sense of this noisy data that's coming through. Yeah, sensor data is extremely noisy. And in a manufacturing environment, it's even more noisier because there's so much happening. There's so much metal, there's bouncing off of stuff happening. Yeah, it's extremely noisy data. And because there were so many sensor companies in the space, but there wasn't any company that was trying to sort of take this data. There were only demo apps that showed how the sensor works. But after that, there was nobody who was offering turnkey software in this space. The only software was go pay a consultant, 100K, he'll build something for you. But then again, that's point in time software, right? That you have. That's literally all people have had for the last like 10, 20 years in this space. And so, which is why I don't think it's really taken off. And our thesis is once you start to offer turnkey solutions in the space, there is a need for.
US at least has risen to the importance of inclusion and diversity. I can see it in my company. I can see it in general across many other companies. They have understood the importance of, how much value that inclusion can add to their business. Right? It's very encouraging to see that companies have sort of awakened now. Do you have any sort of learning or anything to share with, say, women students or entrepreneurs or professionals?
And I say this like with all humility, like I have tried to interview so many women because I'm like, I want more women in my company and stuff, right? Or but I feel like a lot of them have not come from a place where the bar was too high for them. So somewhere they have adjusted to that lower bar, right? And in all my honesty, I can't hire just because of diversity and inclusion. I can't hire somebody with a lower bar because I know it's not going to work. It has to start there. It has to start with your parents believing that you're meant for bigger things in life. Because once that happens, then no matter what everybody else says around you, which people have, right? People have said, oh, when I became a manager, it became very evident. Like there were a couple of people in my team who quit. They didn't want to work for me. They just felt like it was, a sort of a down thing for them to like work for me and stuff. And my manager said, yeah, because you're a woman manager, they don't like you. And that was the first time somebody said that to me. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I'm doing my job well. Like, how does that even matter? So I guess once that goes on, then I feel I have been very lucky in terms of getting sponsorship in my job. So, which is why I said I've always gotten some sort of nomination where people have, said you're doing extremely well and all of that. And I do want to add something to that. I feel like something which is happening with diversity and inclusion is also sometimes it's we are taking away the fundamentals. Like you still have to slog it hard. Like you still have to work like really, really hard at your job. And yeah, if somebody's holding you back, then don't work for them. Go find some other job, right? But you can't like, just work a little bit and say, we all should be treated the same. Like it doesn't work that way, right? You still have to be at the top of your game for somebody to sponsor you. Right? There was one time I had a mentor and I said, I don't see any women managers. I want to be a women manager. How am I going to become one? Because in a group of 200 firmware engineers, there was no woman manager. None, zero at that time. So this mentor of mine actually connected me with 5 women who were directors at Seagate at that point of time. And I got 10 minutes to interview all of them. And that changed my life. I'm like not making it up. It literally changed my life because they told me, ask for positions that you want, be out there, try, take risks. All of that was everything that those people told me. I think from a man's perspective, examining biases, that we have been taught in our life, I think is important. And sort of giving people their fair share, right? I feel like sometimes people have I'm not talking about people who don't have the wrong intent, who have the wrong intent. There are some people who are just like biased, right? Those people, it's going to take a really long time to change those people. For whatever reason, they just are so biased towards like other genders or other religions, you can't do much about that. There are some people who have the right intent, but still don't do the right thing. And I think because they're afraid of being called, because there's so much diversity inclusion. And I'm saying this because I talk to my friends and they're like, if I promote this girl, or if, I sort of speak out for her, like, my friends may say something or somebody may say something. I think we need to do our due there. Like, we need, like, if you think somebody is, worth their fair share, then do your fair share for them, right? Don't let sort of these social, I guess, chit chat hold you back in that case. I feel like diversity and inclusion is going through a little bit of that right now, where there are one or two cases where people will falsely promote somebody because they want to look good on whatever the corporate books and stuff, and then everybody starts to like just pinpoint at that stuff, right? Like, because that happened, nobody else. That is how this company operates, right? And then again, like you said, it becomes an excuse.
Yeah, and Akhila, in your answer, you also touched upon, some women you interview, they are not willing to take the risk because they have small kids at home or whatever.
Yeah.
But tell me about yourself. How are you managing with 2 kids? And I know it's very difficult.
I feel like my answer depends on the week. Like, some weeks I feel like we're cruising through, like we're doing amazing. Like, just this last week we were like there is no way we can make this through, right? So it's definitely on a weekly basis. But anyways, jokes apart, I think how are we doing this? I think the first thing is having a partner who sees your job as important as their job, right? Other than that, I am a firm believer of it takes a village to raise your kids. I know, like in the US, it's a very sort of individualistic culture, and people, don't like to take help from like a lot of different people to raise their kids. I have the opposite belief. I believe like you should take help from as many people as possible, and I think it's good for the kid because you're exposing them to the world to start with. I know people are concerned because they think they'll pick bad habits from other people or something like that. They'll anyways meet people like that later on in life. Again, you need to protect them from harm. But having said that, if they meet, other people, then I think it's good. So we have an amazing nanny, and she's been with us since our second kid was born, and we sort of held on to her as tightly as possible. So yeah, we have that. Other than that, I think one thing I would say, something which has maintained my sanity is through, for the last, I don't remember how long, maybe 15, 16 years, I've been practicing yoga and meditation every day. I actually learned art of living in college, and then I sort of stopped for a little bit and then started it again. And it's the fundamental core to like my sanity in my life. That's one thing that I don't miss. When I was pregnant, I didn't. When I had my kids, I did not. And I think that definitely helps me a lot in terms of just staying sane throughout the day. Most days, right? There are days where you can't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a magic bullet. I feel like having a supportive partner and then getting as much help as possible. Like, and then I think having your priorities. I think that's the third thing. Like, my background is in a blur because my house is a mess, right? So you just have to pick what. And for me, I think I've picked yoga. I've picked my work. I've picked spending time with my kids, and that's sort of the three big things that I've prioritized for the last 3 years. And then if everything else sort of falls apart, and even like.
Any closing remark, Akhila?
Yeah, I think my only thing would be like, I continue to meet people from NIT, and I feel like the fact that we made it there means that we have, some level of perseverance and some level of intelligence, that got us there. But then the experience there, I think, enriches us to a point where, it enables us to like do so much more with our lives. And I feel like we should all keep the bar high for ourselves in terms of like what we want to do. All like sort of step forward more. I think we feel like that in NIT, but I think once we come outside, that sort of wanes a little bit. And then we sort of, get into the daily motions of everything. But I think the world's better if all of us step forward in whatever our small way is and add more to whatever area that interests us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Akhila. I wish you all the best in your, I wish whatever objectives you have in mind for your company, that you achieve all of that, and it becomes one of the biggest companies. I'd love that to happen. And
Fingers crossed. Fingers